Welcome back to the DRS Zone. It is Monday, March 2nd, 2026. And look, if you're tuning in for a standard Australian Grand Prix preview...
You're definitely in the wrong place.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Because we aren't talking about tire degradation today. We aren't talking about side pod upgrades. The paddock right now is, well, it is screaming in panic.
Panic is honestly an understatement at this point. I mean, I have been covering this sport for decades, and I have never seen a season opener teetering on the edge like this.
It's unbelievable.
We aren't talking about racing lines today. We are literally talking about survival lines. We're talking about whether the people and the equipment can physically get to the track.
Right.
And whether one of the most famous teams on the grid is going to commit professional suicide on live television.
It is absolute chaos. We are doing a deep dive today into a massive geopolitical crisis in the Middle East that is threatening to tear the 2026 calendar apart before the first light even goes out. We have ballistic missiles flying near circuits, we have airspace shutdowns, and if that wasn't enough, we have the Aston Martin green tractor disaster, where they are allegedly planning to park their car on purpose just to save money.
It is a perfect storm. You've got the external world violently crashing into the F1 bubble, and inside that bubble, you have engineering failures bordering on an absolute farce.
We're cutting through all the PR fluff today. I do not want to hear "it's raw seek" and see happy little Instagram posts. We are digging into the raw logistics nightmare, the security threats, and the mechanical implosion defining this new era.
We have to start with the Middle East, though. That is the domino that knocked everything else over.
Absolutely. And before we get into the trajectory of these strikes, I need to make this crystal clear. This segment is part of our news coverage of recent F1 events. We are strictly looking at the facts and the logistics here.
Right, because context is everything right now. As of February 28th, which is literally just 48 hours ago, we saw a massive escalation involving Israel, the United States, and Iran. This isn't a minor skirmish. This is a significant exchange of fire. And the response has been widespread. Retaliatory strikes have hit bases in Bahrain, the UAE, Qatar, and Saudi Arabia.
And for the listener who, might just tune in on Sundays to watch the cars go fast, let's be brutal about what those four names represent. Those aren't just countries on a map.
No, they are the foundation.
They are the four pillars of the modern Formula One calendar in that region.
Exactly. Bahrain is where we test and race. Saudi Arabia is usually the second race. Qatar and Abu Dhabi end the season. This is the spine of the sport's global logistics.
And the proximity of these strikes is what is truly chilling. We have confirmed reports of attacks on Port Solomon in Bahrain that is exactly 33 kilometers from the Sakhir International Circuit.
33 kilometers.
In an F1 car, that's, what, a 6-minute drive?
Less. And in a missile's trajectory, it is mere milliseconds. It is within visual range if there is smoke.
Yeah.
We saw this in Jeddah in 2022, right? Where we could physically see the black smoke from the Aramco facility while cars were literally out on track.
I remember that vividly.
But the weaponry we are talking about now is fundamentally different. In 2022, those were largely drones or cruise missiles. Nasty stuff, absolutely, but interceptable. What we are hearing about now involves ballistic missiles.
Walk us through that distinction because it sounds terrifying. Why does the word ballistic change the equation for a sporting event so drastically?
It changes everything because of the sheer physics involved. A ballistic missile leaves the atmosphere. It basically goes up into space and then re-enters, dropping vertically on its target at hypersonic speeds.
Jesus.
Intercepting that requires incredibly advanced systems. The Arrow system, high-end Patriot batteries, even major U.S. military bases struggle to intercept these with a 100% success rate.
So a racer.
It's a zero chance. Zero.
So the argument we always hear from the FIA, oh, the track has the best security in the world, is completely irrelevant here.
Totally irrelevant. You can put armed guards at the paddock gate, but you cannot guard the stratosphere.
Precisely. And that brings us to the immediate chaos that hit the teams this week. The absolute scramble to get to Melbourne. Because F1 operates on a hub model.
Right. Everybody flies through the Middle East. It's the connector between Europe and Australia.
It's the global transit corridor.
Yeah.
Emirates, Qatar Airways, Etihad, these are the airlines that move the circus. The teams, the media, the freight, they all funnel right through Dubai, Doha, or Abu Dhabi.
And suddenly that main artery was just severed, the airspace lockdown.
Did you see the itinerary posted by Kako? Carlos Sainz's manager?
Oh, it was insanity.
It looked like a travel itinerary from hell. It wasn't a flight plan, it was a ransom note.
He went from Milan to London, then a 7-hour layover, then London to Singapore, another layover, Singapore to Sydney, and finally Sydney to Melbourne.
That is not a commute. That is a polar expedition. You were talking about 40 hours of travel just to get to work.
And that's for a driver-manager, someone with serious resources. Look at the mechanics, look at the physio.
Our boy.
Yes. Mark Boya posted that video where he was just staring blankly at a departure screen because his Dubai flights were completely canceled. Gone.
Wiped off the board.
He had to stitch together 3 separate commercial flights just to reach the Australian continent.
And we really have to remember the human cost here. These people are supposed to arrive, build a highly complex car from scratch, operate heavy machinery, and perform pit stops in 2.2 seconds.
It's dangerous.
They're going to arrive in the paddock absolutely shattered.
Jet lag is always the silent killer in Australia. Usually you have a direct flight and maybe a day to recover. This year, you have personnel arriving Thursday morning who haven't slept in 2 days, having to build a car for free practice 1.
That is a massive safety risk. If a mechanic forgets to tighten a wheel nut because they've been awake for 48 hours, that is on the sport.
And there was one specific story that really highlighted how dangerous this got. Nick DeVries.
Yeah, he wasn't just stuck in transit. He was stuck inside the danger zone.
Exactly. He was in Bahrain for a McLaren and Pirelli tire test.
Huh? This was to test the new wet weather compounds for 2026, wasn't it?
Supposedly, yeah. But the airspace closed while he was right there. We had reports that he was effectively stranded. The test was a total wash because you couldn't fly the equipment out, and he couldn't leave.
It really highlights how fragile the logistics are. F1 struts around acting like it's invincible, but if one major transit hub closes, the whole circus just stops.
But, and this is the truly bizarre part, the show in Melbourne is going on. The organizers are adamant.
The show will go on, yeah, but only because of a stroke of dumb luck. The actual cars, the chassis and engines, were mostly shipped via sea freight or dedicated cargo planes that took a different route earlier in the week.
Right, so the fans sitting in the grandstands at Albert Park will see cars on track, but the entire human ecosystem supporting those cars, it's hanging by a thread.
And the real anxiety isn't even about this weekend. It's about what comes next. Because we are staring down the barrel of a return to the Middle East in less than a month.
That is the massive elephant in the room. The Bahrain Grand Prix is scheduled for April 10th to 12th. That is barely a month away.
And before that, you have the feeder series, Formula 2 and Formula 3.
And those teams do not have private jets. They don't have endless budget.
No, they operate on razor-thin margins, and they are scheduled to test in Bahrain starting March 25th. That is 3 weeks away.
The plan was for those F2 and F3 teams to pack up in Melbourne and fly straight to Manama. If that airspace is still a conflict zone, they simply cannot go.
And we're seeing cancellations elsewhere, too. The World Endurance Championship, the WEC, they have a race in Qatar scheduled for late March.
Qatar is currently canceling sporting events left and right to keep their airspace clear for defense protocols. If the WEC cancels, it sets a massive precedent.
Right.
It forces Formula One to look in the mirror and publicly ask, is it actually safe? And if the answer is no, you suddenly have a gaping hole in the calendar.
So play out the scenario for me here. If Bahrain is canceled, do they just move it? Can we slot it in later in the year?
You cannot just move a race in the modern era. The calendar is packed too tight. The season ends December 6th. If you try to push Bahrain to the end of the year, you create a logistical nightmare.
What would that even look like?
You'd be looking at Las Vegas, Qatar, Abu Dhabi, and then Bahrain. A quadruple header ending mid-December.
A quadruple header to end the season. The mechanics would mutiny. That is physically impossible. You're talking about burnout, divorce rates skyrocketing, massive safety failures on the cars.
It breaks every labor law, every logistical limit, and frankly, the mental health of the entire paddock. Plus, if Bahrain is unsafe, usually Saudi Arabia is in the exact same boat geographically.
Wow.
So you're potentially losing 2 races right off the bat. It's a house of cards. If this conflict doesn't de-escalate immediately, the 2026 season is going to have a massive gap before it even gets started.
It creates this incredibly surreal atmosphere.
Right.
We are going down to Australia to celebrate these brand new 2026 regulations, but everyone in the garage is checking their phones for missile strikes.
It feels like the sport is totally secondary to the geopolitics right now.
It is. We are watching athletes compete while the logistics managers are playing a game of geopolitical chess that they literally cannot win.
Speaking of games they cannot win.
Let's pivot. Let's shift gears from geopolitical explosions to an engine that is literally blowing itself apart on track. We need to talk about the green tractor.
The Aston Martin situation?
It sounds like a bad joke, but the reports circulating are dead serious. Aston Martin, we're talking about James Bond's car company, allegedly considered skipping the Australian Grand Prix entirely, just not showing up.
They wanted to cite force majeure, basically telling the FIA, look, circumstances beyond our control prevent us from racing.
But the circumstance is that they built a terrible engine.
Correct. And the FIA would never accept that as force majeure. Force majeure is for earthquakes or wars. It is not a get-out-of-jail-free card for engineering incompetence.
Right.
So they have come up with what is being called the ghost strategy. And I have to say, in all my years covering F1, this is one of the most cynical things I have ever heard.
Walk us through this, because it sounds like something a backmarker team in the 1990s would do to save fuel money, not a factory team in 2026 with Adrian Newey on the payroll.
Okay, so here is the reported plan. They show up to Melbourne. They send the car out in qualifying. Their only goal, literally their only objective, is to set a lap time within 107% of the pole position time.
And just to clarify for the listener who might be new to the rule book, that 107% rule is the bare minimum requirement to be legally allowed to start the race on Sunday.
Right, it's the competency bar. If pole position is 1 minute 20 seconds, you have to be within roughly 5 or 6 seconds of that. As long as they cross that line, they're legally part of the grid.
Okay.
So Sunday comes around, they line up, the lights go out, they race for maybe 2 laps, 3 laps.
And then what?
Then they call the driver in, box, retire the car.
They just park it on purpose when the car's still running.
They drove it straight into the garage and turn it off. DNF. Did they crash? No. Did the engine blow? Not yet. But they are retiring to deliberately prevent it from failing.
That is disgraceful. Why? Why fly all the way to Australia, spend millions on freight costs, stress the staff out of their minds, just to quit after 5 minutes?
It comes down to the cost cap and component allocation. The reports regarding the new Honda power unit are absolutely catastrophic. We aren't talking about it being a little down on straight line speed.
Oh.
We are talking about destructive failure due to the new regulations.
This is the 2026 reg change, right? The massive electrification push.
Exactly. The new rules require a 50-50 power split between the internal combustion engine and the electrical power. It puts immense, unprecedented strain on the energy store and the MGUK.
Right.
The Honda unit is apparently creating a harmonic vibration or a heat issue, it's not totally clear, that is literally destroying the energy store. The battery pack and other ancillary components are just melting down.
And those batteries are not cheap.
They are incredibly expensive under the cost cap. And you only get a very limited number of them for the entire season without taking grid penalties.
Wow.
If Aston Martin runs the full race distance in Australia, all 58 laps, the data suggests the engine will explode and it will take the battery and the gearbox with it.
So if they blow it up in race 1, they have instantly lost millions of dollars against the cap, and they have burned through one of their 3 allowed engines for the year.
Exactly. By retiring voluntarily on lap 3, they saved the hardware. They live to fight another day when or if Honda actually fixes the problem. It is a financial survival tactic masquerading as a race strategy.
It immediately brings back memories of 2015, the infamous GP2 engine era with McLaren and Honda.
It's eerily similar, yeah, but I'd argue this is actually worse.
How so?
In 2015, Honda was slow and unreliable, yes. But in the season opener in Australia that year, Jenson Button drove that McLaren. He was 2 laps down. He finished dead last. But he saw the checkered flag. He respected the race.
And here we are 11 years later, and a manufacturer of Honda's stature might not even try to finish.
That's the core difference. Finishing last is sporting. Quitting to save inventory is, well, it's unacceptable for a factory team. It's insulting to the fans who bought tickets expecting to see Fernando Alonso race. They didn't pay to watch a 3-lap shakedown run.
And the absolute tragedy here is, by all accounts, the car itself, the chassis, is actually good.
That is the cruelest irony of all. You have Adrian Newey, arguably the greatest aerodynamic designer in the history of the sport, overseeing the AMR 26 chassis.
Yeah.
The aerodynamics are reportedly working beautifully in the wind tunnel, the suspension is compliant, the car desperately wants to be fast.
But you cannot push a chassis around Albert Park with your hands. You need a power unit.
And right now, Honda has handed Adrian Newey a grenade with the pin pulled out.
It raises some really serious questions about the readiness of these 2026 regulations as a whole. We all knew the increased electrical reliance was going to be a massive hurdle.
It was a huge engineering leap. And it seems Honda, despite all their recent championship pedigree, has completely missed the landing. They homologated a fix on March 1st, basically yesterday, but they haven't been able to verify it on track because of the testing limits. They are flying totally blind.
So if you're watching this Sunday and you see an Aston Martin pull into the pits on lap 4 and the driver doesn't look angry on the onboard camera, Don't assume it's a puncture. Assume it's the accountant making the call.
Precisely. It's the CFO driving the car this weekend, not the pilot.
All right, man. We've covered the threat of war, and we've covered catastrophic mechanical failures. It feels really heavy. But amidst all this doom and gloom, the F1 Commission did actually agree on some rule tweaks for this year that might actually improve the racing. Let's do a quick fire round. Give me the good news.
Okay, let's find some optimism. First up, Monaco.
Please tell me they finally fixed the procession.
They are definitely trying. The mandatory pit stop rule, it's completely gone for Monaco.
Finally. I've been screaming for this for years.
I know it sounds counterintuitive to the casual fan. They think, wait, don't we want pit stops to create drama? But in Monaco, the mandatory stop forced everyone into the exact same strategy.
Right.
You drive slowly to save tires, you stop once, you drive to the end. It was a literal conga line.
But now, without the mandatory stop, you could have a driver like George Russell try to do the entire race on one set of hard tires, driving incredibly defensively, creating a massive train.
While someone like Oscar Piastri attacks on an aggressive two-stop strategy to undercut him.
Exactly.
Yes, it creates strategic divergence. You might see drivers on completely different tire timelines, which creates overtaking opportunities or at least massive tension that we simply haven't seen in the Principality for decades. It turns it from a parade into a high-speed chess match.
Look, I will take any change at Monaco at this point. Now, what about the rain rules? We've had so many infuriating delays lately because the cars are deemed unsafe in the wet.
This is a really big one, the wet spec rule. Here is how it works now. If the official FIA forecast says there is a 40% chance of rain for the race, the teams can now change their car setup before the start without taking a pit lane penalty.
Wait, this completely breaks Parc Fermé, right? Because usually, once you qualify on Saturday, you cannot touch the suspension.
Correct. Usually, if you set up your car for a dry, qualifying stiff suspension, super low ride height, and it unexpectedly rains on Sunday, you are a sitting duck.
Right, the car bottoms out.
Your car physically cannot handle the standing water. It hydroplanes immediately. So the race director is forced to red flag the race because it's fundamentally unsafe.
So now teams can actually raise the ride height and soften the suspension specifically to handle the rain, even if they qualified in the dry.
Yes, it entirely removes the excuse. If there's a threat of rain, you can set up for it. It should mean fewer red flags, less sitting around the garage waiting for the trap to dry, and more actual racing in mixed conditions.
It puts the skill back in the hands of the drivers rather than the weather radar. That is a massive win for the fans. There is nothing worse than waiting 3 hours for a race to start while the safety car just does lonely laps. And finally, there's a tweak to qualifying.
Just a small but very meaningful change. Q3, the final top 10 shootout for pole, is extended from 12 minutes to 13 minutes.
1 extra minute. It doesn't sound like much on paper.
It's absolutely vital for the tires, though. With these new 2026 tires, the preparation lap is incredibly critical. You need to drive slowly to perfectly bring them into the temperature window.
Right.
With only 12 minutes, if there was any traffic at all, you often only got one fast run. That extra minute guarantees everyone can comfortably get 2 proper flying laps in.
So less traffic jams in the final sector. More actual driving at the limit.
That's the hope. It gives us a much better chance of seeing the fastest car actually on pole, rather than the car that just got the luckiest track position.
Okay, let's zoom out and look at the big picture here as we wrap up. We are entering a brand new era of regulations. New cars, new engines, new aerodynamic philosophies. But as we head into this weekend, I really have to ask you, are we watching a sport or are we watching a reality show about survival?
It feels like a survival show. I mean, when you have historic teams parking cars to save money and you have ballistic missiles closing airspace, the sporting integrity feels incredibly fragile.
Yeah.
We usually talk about tenths of a second. Right now, we are talking about whether the freight will arrive and whether the engines will last 10 minutes.
It really makes you wonder, if F1 is this reliant on regions where airspace can close overnight, does the entire financial model of the sport collapse if they can't race in the Middle East? If we lose 4 races, does the cost cap even function anymore?
It's a terrifying question for the executives, that's for sure.
Is the show really going on, or is it falling apart at the seams? We're going to be watching every single minute of it this weekend, but the tension is going to be absolutely unbearable.
It certainly won't be boring, but for all the wrong reasons.
Listen, here is the bottom line for you listening at home. Do not just watch the race broadcast this weekend. They aren't going to show you the ghost strategy planning in the Aston Martin garage.
Definitely not.
They aren't going to show you the flight maps and the stranded mechanics. You need to watch the reality.
We'll be tracking the technical failures and the political fallout in real time as it actually happens.
Exactly. So follow us right now on TikTok, Instagram, and YouTube for the raw, unfiltered updates that F1 will not show you on the official broadcast. We are DRS Zone on all platforms. Hit that subscribe button so you do not miss the breakdown when the first engine blows.
It's going to be a very, very long weekend.
Keep your DRS open and your head down. We'll see you at Lights Out.